Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Wednesday, May 11th, 2022. I'm Kevin Laramie, and I'm joined by Duane Rollins. In a second, we'll invite you to please subscribe to our YouTube page, hit that subscribe button, and support us in our journey to 1,000 subscribers right here on YouTube. If you're watching us live on Twitter, thank you for your support over the years. Now it's time today to talk about the U.S. Open Cup, Canadian Championship, and the big news, maybe the worst kept secret in international soccer transfers, has been made public. But first, Duane, how are you doing today?
Doing well. We're going to talk about Haaland. We're going to talk about the Canadian Championship, the Voyageurs Cup, and the U.S. Open Cup. Talking about Guelph United in the Canadian Championship made me think that I should wear a Barcelona strip today on air just to balance things out, high to top. So yeah.
To make it sure, you could go. Well, that's what I love too, because the U.S. Open Cup, and it's spring season, so a lot of people are cutting their grass. So it's time to go into weeds of soccer for us. A throwback name, Richmond Kickers, we're going to talk about today. The Rochester, no, not the Rhinos, but Rochester, New York FC, which is, I guess, the heir apparent of the Rhinos. But it's fun to talk about these type of things. And we'll start with the Canadian Championship today, Duane, because we are located in Canada. I'm in Montreal, and you are in Toronto, if people don't know. And we're going to look at the scores because yesterday there was some games. There's some games today in the Canadian Championship. And we also will look at the bracket. But I'm really interested to see how Forge and Outremont play today. And tonight, Vancouver, Valor. Upset alert! Upset alert! Valor! Put your money on Valor. Vancouver barely can play in Major League Soccer this year. Wooden spoon favorite, the Vancouver Whitecaps right now. But Guelph United, you were speaking of, Duane, they played last night against the HFX Wanderers. And the Wanderers won 2-0, and the Wanderers will be moving on. York United winning on the road in Ottawa on penalties. 1-1 and 7-6 on penalties for the Royals. York United moving on. Cavalry 2, FC Edmonton 1 for the second time in 4 days. Cavalry stomping their provincial rival. After a 3-0 win in the league last weekend, Cavalry 2, FC Edmonton 1 in this Battle of Alberta, in this Al Clasico that took place in the preliminary round of the Canadian Championship.
Yeah, look, that Guelph United game, quickly on them, they're an interesting team. They're only in their second year of existence. They're primarily made up of students, university students in that program up there. Guelph has really came up and become a dominant player in the Ontario University Athletics program. And they went and won the League One Championship in their second year, so it's their third year now, just starting. But that's a remarkable story for a program that started, and it speaks to something that's happening at that level. There's really been a step up in the level of play at League One Ontario PLSQ, and we'll see what the BC League has to offer in the years ahead. And I think that's a remarkable thing. And I think that I didn't necessarily anticipate that when CanPL came in. I think we all thought the investment was going to come at the top level. But what's happened is we've seen programs like Guelph come in. We see programs like Simcoe come in. Programs like Electric City, which is in Peterborough, Ontario, come in this year. They're running really professionally. And they're kind of test programs, I believe, for the possibility of going CanPL down the road. And I think that's a good sign for the program. 2-0, they fought it hard. It was a well-played game. Obviously, the professional quality did win out in the end, and it does set up an interesting matchup because TFC, this is bracketed, now has to go to Halifax. Young TFC play in front of a little intense. I'm sure that's going to be a big crowd there at Halifax for that game.
Well, let's have a look at that bracket right now while we cue some house music, some great board music here on Soccer Today. Credit of Canada Soccer for this graphic, by the way, the official bracket of the Canadian Championship. And now we know some of the results, and we'll talk about the games that will take place later today. York United moving on, and York United now will have to play Pacific in the quarterfinals of the Canadian Championship. Cavalry moves on, and they'll play the winner of Vancouver Valor on that top of the right side of the bracket. Now we move on to the bottom. Guelph United, HFX Wanderers. HFX goes and hosts Toronto FC on that game. On the other side, close enough, The winner of tonight's Forge FC versus the Griffons de Mont-Royal and Outremont, not far from where I am right now. Like, if I go on the top of my roof right now, I can probably peek at that field. But they won't be playing there. They're playing, of course, at Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton tonight, and the winner will play CF Montreal at Stade Saputo at the end of the month. And that's your bracket so far in the Canadian Championship.
Yeah, if you could see the game tonight, Kevin, from your roof, then you've got better eyes than I can. As you said, it will be at Tim Hortons Field. I should mention real quickly in the Guelph thing, again, they had a good crowd at like something 2,500 people came out to watch that game. So good for them. But at any rate, look, this is a fun competition now. It's always been fun. We've always enjoyed it. The rivalries have really peaked up. One of the reasons that I believe outside of Cascadia, the Canadian rivalries in MLS are as good as any of them because of the fact that they play each other so often. Montreal and Toronto, obviously they had the great playoff series in 2016. There's your bingo card. I have to get the mention in. I won't say who won it. You know who won it. Nonetheless, there's you can't see the scarf up here, but they won everything. There's another word involved, but nonetheless.
Almost everything Seattle would say, but that's a different conversation for another day.
Yeah. Exactly. So at any rate, to get back to this, no, the addition of these teams has really added something to it, and we will see more teams come online soon. Obviously, you have the new CanPL team coming in BC, so that'll be an additional team in this tournament. You'll have the BC League One champion come in. That'll be an additional team in this tournament, and hopefully down the road one day we can see more teams from that level get in there. It's very difficult financially for those clubs to participate in this. They kind of have to pool the resources to have the one competitor go forward.
Especially if they host. Like, example, Outremont and Montreal, they're not hosting this time around. And they won't host because it would be a Stade Saputo. But I remember when Blainville was hosting a few years ago, and I was talking to, at that time, and I'm not sure if he's still, but one of the head of the Blainville Soccer Association at that point was Sylvain Pereira. And Sylvain Pereira was telling me that the amount of logistics and the amount of money they need to really go to the city, to even their opponents. And at that point, it was against York, and there was one of the big games they were hosting at the Centre Equestre, which is for horses, very similar to Spruce Meadows actually, but at a smaller scale. And it was very interesting to see that they needed to ask all their sponsors to give a bit more, the city, and even like volunteers to help run the game day operations, because what is asked of them compared to what it's a normal game, it's like tenfold of what they used to do in the PLSQ, at least at that time.
No, exactly. And I mean, look, we'll talk about the U.S. Open Cup in a minute here because we also cover American soccer in this show. They have more resources in the United States just because it's bigger. The scale is bigger, therefore it's easier to have more teams involved. I know a lot of Canadians are frustrated by this and they want it to happen yesterday. I do believe behind the scenes there is a movement to get more teams involved in this, to at least get this up to a 16-team bracket. Maybe one day we can have a truly open bracket rather than the way it is kind of now, where they had a bit of a draw this year, but it still was kind of seeded, and you have to sort of work it out that way. Although that said, the draw did work out this year because you know what? Montreal and Toronto are on the same side, and for years in past,
they were always at the final, right? So
yeah, and so they'll meet in the semifinal if they both go by chalk. I don't want to dismiss the possibility of an upset, but the way chalk sets up is that Montreal Toronto would play in the semifinal, which of course would mean that you would have, maybe Vancouver, maybe we'll see.
Maybe Valor, maybe of course Pacific could also be. Well, no, Pacific is actually in the same. But
it's a very lopsided draw because we had a legit draw. So for the first round, so you have Pacific, which is probably your best CanPL team right now, and you have. I believe Forge is on that side of the draw as well. So you have a more open situation. But nonetheless, it's good. It's good to have it. I know some friends that are going to Hamilton tonight. I would be going if I didn't have to work. It takes me 2.5 hours to get to Hamilton. So it's,
So Pacific is just on the top side of the draw in the quarterfinals because of how it. So you have York, Forge, of course, Montreal, Toronto on the bottom half of that draw. Well, that is, of course, an interesting aspect, and we'll keep an eye on that tournament and on the games tonight. Forge hosting this evening Outremont, the Griffins, and it'll be fun to watch the Griffins. And of course also the other game that takes place tonight is Vancouver hosting Valor FC at BC Place in that game of the preliminary round in the Canadian Championship. Let's talk about the U.S. Open Cup, Duane. A few games happened yesterday, 6 to be precise, and close to upsets, but no, at the end of the day, chalk prevailed in a way, but Orlando City giving Philadelphia their earliest exit in the U.S. Open Cup in a long time by winning 2-1 in their round of 32 games Detroit City, supporters owned Detroit City, losing from the penalty spot to Louisville City, 4-2 on the penalty spot. It was 1-1 after regular and extra time. Red Bulls on the road at Audi Field, beating DC United 3-0. DC United not only being bad in league, but being bad in cup, bowing out at the round of 32 in the US Open Cup. Inter Miami facing interstate rival of Tormenta FC of the USL. Inter Miami 3, Tormenta FC 1. I guess they're going to lose some sleep over this. They're going to be tormented, Duane. Tormenta FC missing their opportunity here. Sporting Kansas City 4, FC Dallas 2. Sporting Kansas City may be banking on getting a run here because their season is not looking good. FC Dallas favoring their season, not putting a strong lineup, and losing in the round of 32 in the US Open Cup. In the last game last night, LAFC Portland, 2 for LA, 0 for Portland. The black and gold are moving on to the round of 16.
Yeah, look, if LAFC takes this seriously, you have to consider them the favorite in this tournament right now. They haven't won a trophy before, other than the Supporters' Shield, pardon me. I always forget the Supporters' Shield because it's a regular season trophy. I'm North American, forgive me. However, they haven't won a knockout trophy before. This would be an opportunity for them to prove that they can win in a knockout situation, which has been their Achilles heel so far. And they've been playing brilliantly this year. The Vela situation, it's rumored that it's getting almost close to wrapped up, that he will stay. That is
it's crucial, right? And it's crucial for them to have success for the rest of the season. He's the talisman, and he's back being influential on the score sheet every single week.
Yeah, and also, if they, since Toronto's not going to win MLS Cup this year, they might as well have LAFC win again, so I can, pat myself in the back for months on end, especially if Vela's the MVP, because that was my preseason pick. That's not the main reason for that, but nonetheless, no, they play a good style. Bob Bradley sort of built that thing, but I think that maybe they needed a little tweak, a little something, and here they are. We'll see what happens. But a big win over Portland, which of course, continues to not necessarily be firing on all cylinder. The other story last night is DC. It's not a great story. It's a story we've talked about a lot already this year, so we won't belabor them. We won't kick them while they're down, but it's a struggle there. I think that they might be the worst team, at least in the East this year so far, based on what we've seen, and further indication they're one chance to maybe salvage something out of the season. As I was watching on Twitter last night, a lot of DC fans are pretty frustrated by this because the lineup they used was pretty rotated, and they were because they remember back to, I think it was 2013. 2013 they won the U.S. Open Cup. D-Row was on that team, and it was on a season when they had 13 points in MLS. So they basically salvaged their season by winning the U.S. Open Cup. That proves that you can win it even as a lower position as an MLS team. Why not go for it? We have this conversation all the time with other teams. We're seeing it more often with other teams in other parts of the world. We're seeing it more and more in MLS with choices being made in terms of what to prioritize. Mm-hmm. I do question, if you're not playing in CCL, if you haven't played in CCL, I should say, really, is this that much of a burden to put a full lineup against this? I don't know, but choices have to be made.
And especially when you just came out of firing your coach and moving on to a different system, what else you have to lose? And winning anything is better than winning nothing. And winning a trophy is better than winning no trophy. And winning the U.S. Open Cup would be better than winning not the U.S. Open Cup. But I guess people in D.C. won't experience this year because they're not going to win the U.S. Open Cup. They are out after the round of 32. Let's look at today's schedule. And to me, Duane, this is the interesting aspect of this tournament. Lower league team facing higher seeded team. Upset alert for me at 2 spots here for multiple reasons. Some of them is regional pride. The gateway to the South is Virginia. Richmond, to be precise. One of the first big cities on your way down south in the United States on the East Coast. And Richmond will be facing regional rival Charlotte FC. Richmond was the king of soccer in this region forever until Charlotte and their big NFL money decide to come in and be the big dog in that small pond. I guess dogs swim, so dog could be in the pond. That works. But sure, exactly. But the Richmond Kickers will be facing Charlotte, and I love those matchups. The Richmond Kickers, a storied franchise in lower league American soccer from the 90s on. They've been a mainstay in lower league soccer from the A-League to the NASL to the USL to whatever acronym you want to use. They probably played there. And the Richmond Kickers will be facing Charlotte at 6:30 tonight. And if you can't tell, I'm excited by it.
There you go. No, it's always fun to get those old names back. This is a quick shout out, different team altogether, but I'm just looking at my bookshelf over there at the Rochester Lancers book that I got from Michael Lewis, our friend Michael Lewis, who's been on the show many times. Once we get the capabilities, have interviews back, we're going to interview Michael about that book on this show. You should go out and look it up for you if you're interested in the history of American soccer, North American soccer. Look that one up. But no, yeah, Richmond Kickers is a name. A lot of MLS fans remember the tournament, the preseason tournament that used to take place for years. They've started to do it again. That's something that's exciting. It's always nice to have sort of traditions in North American soccer. That was one for a while. There's a lot of games here to talk about. We're not going to be able to talk about them all, but there's certainly some interesting matchups. You get a New York derby of sorts with Rochester. Speaking of Rochester, it's not the Lancers or the Raging Rhinos.
No, exactly. It's the I guess you can say it's a heir apparent because they do include the rhino in one of their secondary logos, as a nod to the past. But it's not. But if you go to Rochester, please go to Dino's Barbecue. I hope it's still open because it's one of the best barbecue joints I've ever been to. But the New York City FC, Rochester, New York FC, I guess it's the New York FC rivalry, will be facing tonight 7 p.m. Another interesting matchup if you want to look at lower league is California United facing LA Galaxy. That's tonight 10:30 p.m. Sacramento Republic. Oh, what could have been? A potential joining in MLS to not, and maybe will never join MLS. We'll be facing the Phoenix Rising FC, which is always a good trivia answer if you want to know which club Didier Drogba last played for in his entire career. It is Phoenix Rising FC. The Seattle Sounders facing the San Jose Quakes. That's actually interesting to me, Duane. Do you think the Seattle Sounders can turn around after winning the CCL to win then the U.S. Open Cup? Because they need to win tonight to do so. And they're facing the Quakes, which they're a team who have nothing to lose. And you know what they say about facing a team that has nothing to lose? Well, it's the worst kind of prey because they will play until the end.
This is one of those situations where choices will probably be made. Seattle has not done well in the league because they won the CCL, and good for them for doing that. We will for forever first, all that sort of stuff. But, well, not first, but first since the new format. Nonetheless, they're going to have to make some choices here. Now, that said, the U.S. Open Cup is what started Seattle's dominant run. If you think back to their early years in the league, it was winning the U.S. Open Cup that established them as one of the dominant teams, one of the best programs in this league. And I think that not only for Seattle to maybe get back to a little bit of their past, they haven't done well in this competition in a while now, but also just other teams should look at this and think maybe this is an opportunity. You mentioned Charlotte. Charlotte's doing okay in the league. Nothing great, but they're doing okay in the league. And as I've said before, teams that aren't very good can sometimes win U.S. Open Cup. So why not try and take a run in this? Why not prioritize this? If you don't think you're necessarily going to win a championship, does it really matter if you finish a couple points out of the playoffs? Really? Is it that much of a deal to play one game on the road and bow out to a good team? No, not really. I've seen that as a TFC fan. That 2015, they're in the playoffs. Oh, that wasn't very fun.
They lost to Montreal 3-0.
There you go. I set you up for that one. There you go. Drogba. Yeah. Drogba scored in that one, didn't he? There's a second reference to Drogba.
Probably. You're right. But on that note, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about the big news in the world of international soccer transfers yesterday. After months and years of tractation, tribulation, speculation, and even sometimes reporting of rumors, but now it is official. Erling Haaland will wear baby blue comes fall. And we'll talk about that and more after this short break right here on Soccer Today.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Kev Larman with Duane Rollins as always, and we'll invite you to subscribe to our Patreon page and support us financially at patreon.com/Sports Podcast Network. It helps pay the bills on, of course, literally keep the lights on right here on Soccer Today as we continue in breaking down this big news, Duane, because it's now official agreement on principles. The greatest not free agent, but the greatest transfer target in recent memory has decided to join Manchester City. It is a big day for everyone involved. Erling Haaland chooses Manchester City. Agreement on principle again. A reported 60 million euro transfer. A bit lower than anticipated. If people knew, like Fred cost more by Manchester United a few years ago. I think there's the pandemic. The pandemic does lower a bit the target and the transfer targets over the last few years. But Duane, you can see these numbers. And let's look at his career statistics, because he is one of the most efficient striker in history and in the beginning of his career. That is over the last 7 years, 150 games played, all competitions with all clubs, 114 starts, 124 goals, 30 assists, which brings a goals and assists per game at 1.31. And to me, the most staggering statistic here is the team points per match, which is 1.95. You can round up to 2. So every time he wears the club's uniform, you get 2 points minimum. That's not bad, which means most of the time you get 3 because you can't get 2, and you round up, which means when Haaland plays for you, you win, and that's what you do.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it helps that he played for Dortmund, although Dortmund has not been particularly great over the last couple of years. Even in the German Bundesliga, although they have finished high in that table, they've struggled compared to what they have in the past. In terms of the transfer, the amount, it is the release clause. What was happening here is that basically Dortmund decided to hold on to him for a year. And now there's no value because they know that they can get him for free if they wait 6 months, that he's going to pay that money up front. They're going to have him right away, and they can just have to negotiate the contract. We should say that. They still have to negotiate the personal terms with him. That seems like it'll be a formality, though. There is a history of Haaland.
Yeah, exactly. What would you like, Erling? Well, okay, here's a blank contract. Just fill in the blanks, and we're going to say yes. Yeah,
because especially now that financial fair play has essentially been suspended because of pandemic and just there's no enforcement there. The big clubs just leaned in long enough, including City, I should say, with their contention against the UEFA. They ended up basically killing financial fair play. You can hate them all you want for it, but that's what happened. Nonetheless, this is going to happen. There is a history with Haaland and City through his father. It wasn't that big of a connection. It was overstated a little bit. There are photos out there of him wearing City strips, old City strips too, like from when they were not rich City.
So with like Thomas Cook on the jersey.
Exactly. 90s
remember?
City stuff.
Well, you remember Thomas Cook, first of all, who was bankrupt a few years ago. I was a travel agency across the world, by the way.
Yes, Transat. If you've ever flown Transat, they used to be Thomas Cook, but at any rate, they kind of twisted. You know how corporate worlds work. But look, it makes a lot of sense from both the player and the club's perspective. We all know if you look at Manchester City, and especially look at that series with Madrid, which interesting enough were the two teams that were most likely to get him. City had more shots, they had more opportunity, they had more ball. They had everything except for more goals in the end. And obviously you can talk about the collapse, which deserves to be talked about on its own account. But the reality is they could have had 3 or 4 more goals than that based on the amount of opportunities they created. What Haaland does better than almost anyone else in the world right now is he finishes.
Yeah, and that's what you need.
Goals.
A poacher, right? He's going to give you what Jesus can't. He's going to force his way into the spot where he needs to be and finish it there. Why? Because he's bigger, he's stronger than everybody else on the pitch. Oh, also he's more talented, and also he can finish it. We've seen Haaland score amazing goal with his head, but that's not the ones I want to remember. It's not the amazing, spectacular goals that count. To me, in a regular season, and in a season that spans a long time, what actually counts is the amount of time where you score that ugly goal, where you just will yourself to just touching the ball when you need to for it to cross the line, and the amount of goals that actually influence the game. And that's what Haaland gives you. He will give you that breakthrough in a 0-0 game where it might be difficult for you to get that goal.
Yeah, and look, I mean, some people might bristle at the term poacher. He can be a poacher, but he's also more than that. He's just an overall talented player. Like, he can play in many different ways, which makes him even more dangerous. Now, the question people are going to have leading up to August is how you're going to integrate him into a lineup that already has a lot of talent in that lineup. You see a lot of players that sometimes come into City and they don't play right away.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to be the case with him because this is a different level player.
Yes.
City has never, for all of the comments City have, like City has all the money, City has the money. If you look at the recruitment strategy, it's never been to go after the big names with this one exception. They go after kind of secondary names. They go after players that are just a tier below, and then they work them into the system. You look at a guy like, David Silva going back a ways now. He wasn't that well known coming in. He was kind of not a borderline Spain player, but he wasn't the most famous of the Spanish players out there. But they made him arguably one of the best midfielders in Premier League history based on that system that he played in. Haaland's not going to be a guy that's going to take time to get into the system. They need that strike force up front. They need that biting edge up top. They have been frustrated at times to watch this year as a fan because they create so much, but they just can't finish, which leaves them vulnerable to the occasional breakdown at the back because they're not geared to defend. That's not how this team's set up. So when a team like Madrid gets a little bit of momentum going forward, suddenly just an ounce of panic gets in and, 90 seconds of madness ends their Champions League dreams for another year, right?
Yeah.
We'll see. Look, they're probably going to win a title, I think. They have 3 games left. We'll talk about that on Tuesday. By the time Tuesday rolls around next week, we'll be talking about 1 game left of the season. So we'll know pretty much now. They can afford to lose a game from this point forward. So because of Liverpool dropping points. But anyway,
exactly.
This makes them unquestionably the favorites to win the Champions League next year. I'll say that outright. You can't not say you can't pick anyone above them.
No,
other than narrative reasons, other than City never gets it done. But this is just
also,
a wild card they're putting in.
Look at the amount of money spent on Haaland and look at the amount of money spent on Grealish, right? And makes more sense to me to spend that amount on Haaland than Grealish. And maybe that corrects a bit that mistake. I think that corrects the lack of performance output in Gabriel Jesus. He never quite lived up to expectations. And to me, that is also the case. And the era of the false nine is quite gone by this point. And you need a striker that is more like a Haaland than anything else. And going forward, which you'll need an tactical evolution of Pep Guardiola too, right? Going forward, because at one point, defensively, you need to be a bit more accountable to be able to not just rely on that amazing goal output in the end of the game and having that one mistake cost you. Like against Real Madrid, yes, you're playing against one of the best attack in the world, but at the end of the day, you can't concede 3 goals, 4 goals, and you can't concede 2 goals in 5 minutes, regardless of the situation and game situation. Defensively, you need to be a bit more accountable. And Haaland gives you that too, because this is not just a quote from a terrible movie of the 90s called Dynamic Duo with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dennis Rodman. But the best offense is defense, and the best defense is offense. Meaning if your striker is the first one to press and tackle and strip possession of the opponents, you might gain possession a few times more than loses, which at the end of the day might give you the edge in a close game against Real Madrid in a Champions League semifinal.
Look, getting this done early matters too. They also have a young player coming in from Argentina as well that's very highly touted. So they've got their offensive side of the ball done. They can focus a little bit back there. I don't think the problem with City at the back is necessarily the center halves. They're pretty talented players, but what I killed them in that Real Madrid game was they were getting beat down the flank, particularly down that left flank. And they were consistently getting beat on speed. And the biggest wild card there was Kyle Walker's injury. Even though he did start that game, he was never fully fit. He didn't finish the game. Once Walker came off, that's when the damage started to really pile up. So I think that's the other area that City will need to address in the offseason. But when you're talking about upgrading your backup fullback positions, then you're a pretty set team. But they do need to create a little more speed back there to counter that, what I call it, the exhaust port, right? When they get beat on the break up the middle, they need those fullbacks to collapse back in. They need Alphonso Davies. They need a guy like that. They could have Alphonso Davies. I'd be happy with that. I'd be very happy. But nonetheless, I don't think that's in the cards.
Do you mean the soccer player or the rapper? I'm not sure which one.
Oh, you know what? I'm really glad that I wasn't outrageously rich when I was 21, 22 years old because of the stupid things I would have done. No offense, Fonzie, but yeah, I cringe at what I would have created out there, and we'll leave it at that.
Oh, okay, yeah. Your first name is Duane, and it starts with a D. That's also important to know when you're listening to that song. All right, it's a great song. I'm not gonna lie, it was catchy. I've enjoyed it. Enjoyed a lot of things lately. All right, but when we talk about Haaland, of course, does that spell the end of Gabriel Jesus with Manchester City? Does the advent of maybe the biggest name in soccer for the next few years in Erling Haaland, does spell the end and maybe the end of his fame. Will he fade into oblivion? Where does Gabriel Jesus go from now on?
It depends on what he wants to do. He is better suited as a winger in many ways. So if he wants to go out there and battle for position, I'm sure that they will keep him around if they can't find a taker for him. But that said, you look at the amount of talent City has on the wing. You brought in Grealish and you spent a lot of money on him, so they're not going to give up on him overnight. They're not going to ship him out. You've got Raheem Sterling, who, as for much as people fault him for things, look at his numbers. He's produced outrageous numbers in his career. They're not going to throw him away. Where are you going to find space out in the side for him to get that? So it will all come down to that, basically.
Yes, it will. And Duane will be back in a second by video, by the way, if you have it. It happens from time to time. But no, I do agree. And we'll see if we find a way for Gabriel Jesus to find his way back into the lineup of Manchester City. But it might not be. And if the case is that he actually leaves Manchester City with this, maybe he's going to find a way to play somebody else. Maybe La Liga is more suited for his talent. I always thought that expectations and what we saw from Gabriel Jesus was a bit of the disconnect there. Never quite lived up to the hype. But it's also hard to live up to a hype when you're Brazilian and everything you do is hyped a bit too much. You're like looked with a bit too much of a magnifying glass, and then you're hyped because, well, you're Brazilian. So you're the next incarnation of Pele, right? And it brings maybe an unfair expectation. But we'll see where Gabriel Jesus lands if he does leave City this summer.
Yeah, you're also being directly compared to Kun Aguero, who is, one of City's 1A or 1B greatest players of all time, and was playing above you at that point up front. So, by the way, it's the 10th anniversary of Aguero's goal this week, and they're doing a lot of work. If you're interested in that, even as a neutral, they're at City TV through City's social media channels. They're doing a lot of really interesting work to commemorate the 10th year anniversary of that famous day. But nonetheless, look, yeah. Jesus is actually, ironically, if this is the end, is playing maybe as good as he has been over the last few weeks when they've been relying on him to score a little bit more. He had that 4-goal game a couple weeks ago. They're going to need him down the stretch. They still have to win 3 more games. They have to win 2 of those 3 games anyway and hope that they don't get blown out in the third, which, seems likely, but they still have to do the job starting today with Wolves.
Sure. And we'll see if Man City can get the job done. We can also talk about it on tomorrow's show. Until then, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Larme, and this show at Soccer Today SPN. We'll be back with a brand new edition as soon as possible right here on all our channels. You can subscribe to our show everywhere you find your favorite podcasts, and of course on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, and Google Podcasts. You can also find advertising opportunities on this show. If you'd like to advertise, name a segment, we can talk, we can have great business conversations. Contact me at sportspodcastnetwork@gmail.com. And of course, you can support us financially by going to patreon.com/sportspodcastingnetwork. Thank you very much for your support over the years and for listening and downloading this show. For Duane Rollins, I'm Kev Larme, and until next time, have a great soccer